Can you share with us a bit about what has worked and what has not worked? Give us a couple specific issues facing governments and the public sector in implementing this kind of performance management or performance informed budgeting system.
Well, what we did find was we looked at application of performance budgeting across the 4 stages of the budget process: budget development, budget deliberation and passing the budget, execution, and audit. And it was very interesting to us that we found that states with performance budgeting law that emphasized the specific stage were more likely to conduct work in that area. So what do I mean by that? In Ohio, they have performance budgeting law that requires agencies to present performance information at the budget development level in their request, or their request will not be considered. So we saw very high use of performance measures and the application of it in the development stage for explaining, justifying their budget for strategic purposes, and then moving to the legislative stage. We found in Louisiana and in Utah, states with laws that emphasize presentation of performance data and information at the legislative stage, that indeed these states concentrated on those areas to a high degree, but in different ways. In Louisiana, we saw that legislators didn't tend to use the information as much as those legislators did in Utah, according to the agency personnel we were talking to. At the execution stage, we found that in Idaho and in Arizona, those states have laws that have high expectations for responsibility of presenting performance information at the execution stage, and we saw exceptional use by Idaho and Arizona of performance measurement and performance budgeting for execution that ranged from not only tracking, of course, and benchmarking, but also reshuffling staff and actually rebudgeting. And then finally, at the audit stage in South Carolina and Colorado are states that have law that has very definitive requirements for the audit, performance audit. In South Carolina, agencies must provide an accountability report at the end of the year. And that we found that South Carolina agencies utilize those reports heavily for then developing their budgets in the subsequent year. Looking back, they're looking back to look forward, and the legislators use those. So there is some great intel there for a government seeking to establish a system to understand that the definitive aspects of law can help focus folks on the concentration that's going to be most helpful, again, in that collaborative relationship between executive and legislative.
Yeah, Katherine mentioned a lot of things, what works. Let me share a little bit about what does not work. Well, I think, one thing we all know is if you come to this performance management project with the expectation of a mechanical link, that does not work, right? I think we covered this in the prior minutes. And the second thing that does not work is do too much at one time. What we learn is that this is a gigantic project. It takes time, because what needs to be moved at the center of this project is not numbers or people. And it takes time to manage the change. And if you're really talking about the impact on budgeting, and you try to correlate the performance activities that you're doing and the final budgeting, most likely, also evidenced by our own research, is that there's no direct link between these two. Now, where the possible link could appear between performance and budgeting over a long period of time, because the missing link in between is how we go from understanding of performance that leads to policy change, and that the policy change triggers budgeting. So that change needs to take a very, very long time. You cannot expect that the impact will be over time, and we cannot do too much at a given time because we're moving people, not moving, sort of cargos. Last but not least is what does not work is if the project focuses too much on technicality, not on culture building. That will not work. The capacity, the technical aspects of it, the cultural aspects of it has to merge together, and has to merge in such a way that would be correlating, these two processes together, become an operational manual. How you incorporate performance with the daily task, the daily process. And that's the operational aspects of it. So anything that's focused too much on technicality, not enough or not at all on culture building, it's going to be a tough uphill battle that we may not win at all. So I think one of the things that Katherine and I summarized in the book is, for any projects, performance management projects, to be successful, it needs to focus on 3 sets of activities: cultural, technical, operational. Now, for any government who's thinking about that, we need to think about, are we doing something in each of those 3 categories? Do we have a key behavioral change that aimed at cultural change, that aimed at operational integration, that will help us get to the better performance indicators through technical aspects of the work? So these 3 things, culture, operational, technical, these 3 things have to go together, instead of saying, oh, let's have, just talk with a think tank, or talk with, no offense to think tank, or no offense to researchers or external people. An external driven process may not work. It has to be an internal driven process.
And these things are, relatively not simple to do, but one method is, of course, starting small, and starting, if you were developing law, that you assign responsibilities for metrics, and then that law can be built on over time. Also applying the system to a sample of agencies and programs, and having a goal of, in 7 years, we're going to be, complete. So as a nod to capacity, government capacity. So, there are reasonable things that can be done to inculcate an organization with a culture and a commitment to a performance system.